Having a quorum present, I call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee meeting for December 14th, 2020. Our first item of business is approval of the agenda. We do not need to have a roll call for that unless anyone has any changes or additions to the agenda. All right, seeing none, we will say the agenda is approved. And moving on. All right, we're going to approve or look to approve the minutes from November 23rd, 2020 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the meeting minutes? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Okay, moved by Gonzalez, second by Fredson. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings. Ferguson. Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner.
Aye.
Zirin. Barber.
Aye. With that, the minutes are approved. Our next item on the agenda is the Tac Report. There was not a Tac meeting, but I believe Mr. Finley was going to join us if anyone had any questions or comments for him. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the other reports. The next is MTS Director Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. A couple updates. Last Monday, the Governor's Blue Ring Committee completed their work in their last committee meeting. They now transitioned it over to council staff to finish up the report and so they can send it off to the governor. We had hoped to have it sent out this week to all council members after it is transmitted to the governor, but they did look at all the items that I've been reporting on and have some recommendations. And rather than go through the recommendations tonight, I thought we'll just wait to send a report on to council members. It should be out shortly, though. It is basically completed. No TAB report on the agenda tonight, but this is a big week for TAB. On Wednesdays when they take their final action to make a recommendation for the slate of projects for the regional solicitation that gets transmitted to this committee for approval. This marks the end of the 2-year cycle of TAB of the developing the regional solicitation process, scoring, and then making the final slate of recommendations. And so a big week for TAB. This is what they put a lot of effort into. I just want to acknowledge the effort. So you'll see those projects and recommendation in January. On December 5th, we transitioned the Metro Red Line from the MTS division over to Metro Transit operations with the December pick, and all things are going fairly smoothly with that. And then a brief COVID update. We have continued to have a little bit higher rate of positive tests among our contracted workforce for the second week in a row. Last week we had 8 positive tests come back of those that were tested. That brings us to 95 positive tests. Again, this is out of a workforce of over 1,500 across all the contracts. 22 of those 95 are still currently active cases. So, and a lot of those 22 were in the past 2 weeks. From a ridership standpoint, our ridership is fairly stable on Metro Mobility. Not seeing any rises with that, just fairly stable. However, our healthcare transit essential workers continues to even get stronger than ever. Last Wednesday, we set a new record high for 1,598 trips provided to healthcare workers on the Metro Mobility service. So this is that service we added with COVID, and it seems to be doing very well, and we'll continue this on as long as we can. But the demand is growing, not even leveling off. So I'm glad we can provide this service, and thought we'd keep you up to date on that. That, Madam Chair, concludes my remarks. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director Thompson. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to General Manager Koistra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've now had 317 total cases, COVID cases, since the start of the pandemic. That's through yesterday. And since the last Transportation Committee, we've had 84 cases. Thankfully, we saw a drop in reported cases last week as compared to the week before. To put the trend in context, looking at the last couple of months, in October we had 56 cases for the entire month. In November we had 120 cases, so more than double October. And thus far in December we've had 38 cases. I saw a couple of charts today that showed statewide charts and Metro Transit charts in terms of trend since the beginning of the COVID. And the trend line for Metro Transit is almost identical to the trend line, the statewide trend line charts. So we continuously monitor and the number and distribution of cases across work sites. Today there are no current active hotspots or clusters. Light rail has been hit a little more active since the last transportation committee. In addition to monitoring case counts, we're continuously monitoring the potential for operational impacts due to employees having COVID or needing to quarantine because they have been exposed to COVID. At this time, we have no noteworthy operational impacts. We were carrying some operators. We have been carrying more operators than typically called for, given the level of service we're providing, and this has proven to be helpful with increases in COVID-related absences. We started the new schedules on December 5, and we continue to have a Plan B option available to us if too many people become unavailable to work. As a reminder, we're currently at about 80% service on buses, and we have a Plan B option that is equivalent to about 65% of pre-COVID service hours. We do continue to conduct thorough contact tracing when an employee tests positive. This means we identify all close contacts, including co-worker contacts outside the workplace. This practice results in additional employees placed into quarantine and thus increases the number who cannot report to work, but it also reduces the chance of workplace transmission. From a ridership perspective, system-wide, we remain down between 60 and 65% compared to pre-pandemic levels. There's been no notable change in ridership trends over the past few weeks and even the past 2 or 3 months. I do want to mention that we're now providing voluntary on-site COVID testing for asymptomatic essential workers. This is a saliva testing method, and we started providing saliva tests on December 1. More than 200 tests have been issued. There's been 0 positives through this testing process through December 13th. We continue to offer COVID testing for asymptomatic employees at the Haywood Well at Work Clinic, and employees also can continue to have access to drive-up test sites as well. With respect to the masks are a must campaign, we continue to communicate to our customers that masks or other face coverings are required while on transit. Our marketing department reports that all marketing tactics we plan have now been implemented. That includes onboard vehicle and LRT and bus. On LRT and bus, audio message that masks are required. Onboard vehicle scrolling message, new fleet sticker on the windows with masks and social distance messaging, added sticker to the fare box on buses, new rail station kiosks and bus shelter posters are up, digital video screens at LRT stations and BRT stations, and I have a list of about 3 or 4 others that I won't read off, but at any rate, I wanted to give you the impression, because it's true, that we are doing a lot of work on promoting masks on our system. The Metro Transit Police Department continues to monitor compliance and hand out masks as needed. And currently, the police department is observing approximately 76% compliance rate on LRT. That's an improvement since we've started this. And I think I mentioned last time that we were in the neighborhood of 90% compliance rate on buses. Finally, I want to mention that we have had some light rail vehicle maintenance issues, that we are working with Siemens to inspect light rail vehicle capacitors and removing vehicles from service for repairs when the capacitor testing requires that. This is an issue that Siemens has been experiencing with other transit properties. I believe San Diego and another transfer property, perhaps Houston. But the result of this is that we're having to pull 22 cars out of the system to get capacitors replaced, and that means that we are going to be running mostly 2-car trains on Green Line and Blue Line instead of the usual 3-car trains for the next couple of weeks. We do recognize that running the 2-car trains instead of 3-car trains can make it more challenging for customers to socially distance. At this point, again, all light rail vehicles have been inspected. We don't have a firm date for when all repairs will be made, but we anticipate running cars, returning cars to service as they're repaired and try to get back to full capacity over the next couple of weeks. But you may hear questions about why we're running 2-car trains, and it has everything to do with replacing the capacitors that need to be replaced on our cars. So with that, I'm available for questions as well.
Any questions for Councilmember Gonzalez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question about whether we are considering once the vaccines for COVID become more widely available, are we going to ask or require employees to be vaccinated, a mandatory policy?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Gonzalez, I understand there's been the approach that's going to be made as dictated by the state will be that it will be voluntary, but strongly encouraged and strongly promoted. I think there's a lot of issues you get into when you require vaccinations, issues of religious belief, issues of health issues that might prevent that. And I think the approach, at least initially, will be to encourage and promote, strongly encourage and promote, but not to require. I'm a little bit over my skis on this, I'll say, because I don't think the conversations have been completed, but that's the best I can give you at this point. That's what I anticipate.
Thank you. And I have a quick question follow-up. This is on a completely different matter. I'm just wondering about the updates to the seats on our buses, because I remember we had a conversation that those were being replaced. I don't know what stage are we in the replacement process.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Gonzalez, let me get back to you on that. That's a really good question. I actually came across my mind a couple of days ago, and I forgot to follow up with it. So this is a good reminder for me to find out where we're at with the installation. I know the contract was let out. I also know that I believe Vince Pellegrin is online. So maybe if you have an update, Vince, maybe we won't have to wait.
Yeah, Wes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, we've begun to install some of the new seats. I think you're talking about the light rail vehicles, not the buses. These are in the light rail vehicles. So we've begun installation. I don't have delivery of materials, but installation has begun with the new hard seats. I think we had as much as, last time I talked with LRV maintenance, we had 16 trains worth to do, in stock. So that process has begun.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. I think Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. Yes, good to hear about the seats. And you had mentioned that we wanted to promote the vaccines when they do become available, but not be required. Do you know where we are in the priority list for those vaccines?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Chambliss, that's really a good question and one that I've been asking as well. I've talked with Mary and others about having conversations with the state entity that is managing the priorities and encouraging that we receive priority in the second tier. We understand that, of course, that healthcare workers and vulnerable individuals need to be in the first tier, but I have certainly asked raise this to the attention of Mary Bogey and to the chair about promoting transit workers as being toward the front of the line the next year, given that, we still we still deliver about 90,000 rides a day. And even at a 60% reduction in ridership. So, and this is shared quarters. And anyway, I'm not going to restate all the arguments with you, but I'm making them. And I don't know that those decisions have been made yet at a statewide level, but we're actively promoting transit workers at this point.
Great, thanks. Yeah, because they are essential workers, but of course, second tier seems appropriate. My other question, if I could, Deb,
Of course.
thanks, is related to the Homeless Action Team hat. I know we secured some additional funding. Is there a report on how our support of the homeless and locations near our sites is going?
I don't have that information, Madam Chair and Councilmember Chambliss. Let me get back to you with that, please, if you'd allow.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any additional questions from council members? All right. Thank you, Nick and Wes. Then we are on to our business items. There are no items on consent tonight. Our first business item is number 2020-288. It's an amendment to the travel behavior inventory contracts, and we have Jonathan Ehrlich here to talk.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Jonathan Ehrlich with Metropolitan Transportation Services. I'm here to discuss two amendments related to the travel behavior inventory that really go together. The first is an amendment to a subordinate funding agreement with MnDOT that transfers money to the council to pay for the travel behavior inventory household travel survey. And the second is the consultant contract with our consultant Resource Systems Groups Incorporated to actually conduct the survey itself. There are two actions that are embedded in this business item. The actual amendments, although slightly different in form and with two different parties, are essentially identical in terms of the changes. The amendments do a number of things. Some of which would be the first are a series of technical changes in the contracts that relate to changes in expiration dates and additions of payment milestones for waves 2 and 3 that we had always intended to make to those contracts. And those by themselves wouldn't require coming to the council, but they're part of this this particular action. The second is the changes in scope to include additional tasks for strategies to increase the representativeness of the survey sample by race and ethnicity, which is the highest priority for the second wave of the survey, which is to commence in early 2021. The third, and this is the most expensive piece of the budget amendment, is to increase the sample size of Wave 2 to fully measure ongoing changes and increase sample statistical power. We're doing this for two reasons. One of them is to, as we're making adjustments to our survey process, we expect to do a better job of capturing and increasing participation of historically underrepresented populations to be able to best evaluate how we're doing. And to increase the sample size from that respect. The second is we really do expect 2021 to continue to be an unusual year. And it's one that we think is very important to track and very important to have data about how travel behavior continues to change in the second year of the pandemic. But we expect that it will be dissimilar enough both from 2019 and 2023 that we won't be combining it with data for data from those years in order to increase the statistical power of it using combinations with multiple survey years. So we wanted it to have enough sample size and a large enough sample to be able to meaningfully stand on its own and give us information about how travel behavior changes over the course of 2021, and of course provide it to you. And then the last change is incorporating into the scope additional budget to incorporate and additional specific tasks to account for the additional risk of both unexpected occurrences, some of which may result from COVID-19, and others that may result from things that we simply don't know about that could happen in 2021, and the need to be able to be more nimble than we expected to be in the survey with respect to external factors that are difficult to measure or predict. Some of those, again, may be related to the pandemic. Some may be related to other external factors. We expect that this amendment will increase the budget of the TBI from $4.723 million. Over half of that has already been spent and is part of wave one of the travel behavior inventory. The entire contract, both with MnDOT and with RSG, covers waves 1 in 2019, wave 2 in 2021, and wave 3 of the survey in 2023. And the numbers are different because the amendment with the consultant is for the total amount, and the contract with MnDOT is for the federal share, which represents only 80% of that amount. These scope changes will enable a better survey in 2021. There are things that we know that we need to change about the travel behavior inventory as we move into its next wave and next phase in 2021. And this amendment is the formal mechanism that will allow our contracts to be amended. Part of the changes that we are anticipating making that will be paid for as part of this amendment will be some focus groups and other focused research into additional methods to increase representativeness of the sample. And we're going to be in the first couple of months of wave 2 experimenting with additional methods to increase the representativeness of the second wave. And I can assure you that we will be back here to discuss the specific changes that we're making in response to those focus groups early in the period of wave 2, and we will continue to bring back both methods and results of this very large survey to you as it continues. With that, I'm happy to stand for questions, either to get into more specifics or questions about the material and the amendment itself.
And thank you, Jonathan. Any questions from council members? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was late raising my hand. I was kind of thinking. Thanks for this update on the survey. I know in the past when we talked about this survey, it's intensive in terms of being a traditional method, but with our goals to do a better job with representativeness in the survey, I support increasing the expenditures to do that, since that's an important goal. Some of it's new territory for us, so I look forward to the next phase of this goal and getting the updates and what the strategic plan and tactics are for increasing the representativeness, and also doing that in a safe way with the pandemic. So thanks for the forethought on that as well.
Councilmember Sterner.
Chair, I just had just a little more detail on the survey. Does it going to look at all 7 counties in that, especially in places that the service hasn't been there, the outlier places, such as Hastings or Waconia, or Anoka, Dakota, Scott County, or is it concentrated on the metro areas where our diversity is stronger?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Sterner, the survey itself covers not just the 7-county area, but also all of the adjacent counties. So we are doing a survey of the travel behavior of the entire economic region of the Twin Cities, and some of our efforts to increase representativeness will be focused on specific communities, but the survey itself will continue to broadly cover the entire region, roughly in proportion to population.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? All right, now I will say I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-288.
This is Fredson. I'll move approval.
Moved by Fredson. Is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Seconded by Gonzalez. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings, Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin, Barber.
Aye. And with that, the motion carries. Thank you, Jonathan. Next,
you.
we're on to business item 2020-342, which is Metro Mobility gasoline fuel supply contract. And we have, I believe, Greg Shuck here to talk. Or maybe
Madam
Chris.
Chair,
Oh.
member of council members. Yes, I'm Greg Shuck, Metro Mobility. I'm here to propose proposed action item is that Metropolitan Council authorizes, awards, and execute a contract 20P031 with World Fuels Services Inc. in the amount of $30,801,811.93 to supply gasoline in accordance with the contracts over 3 years. A little bit of background: we have Metro Mobility has over 600 vehicles, gasoline-powered vehicles to provide the service for Metro Mobility. The fuel is purchased by the council and delivered to the providers for their own fueling stations. This way we can keep our cost to the minimum. And let's see, we had put invitation for bid was out in September. It went out to 8 plan holders. Procurement held the bid opening on October. We had 5 plan holders submit a bid. World Fuels was the winning bidder out of the 5 with the lowest bid that came in. We are anticipating the fuel price increases over the next 3 years, increased ridership post-COVID. We're looking at an estimated 3-year amount for fuel of the $30,801,811. I am recommending that we go ahead and approve that contract.
Thank you, Greg. Are there any questions from council members? Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Chair. I was just kind of wondering, like, what do we save, if anything, on doing a contract like this versus just having our buses go to like a retail setting on some of our vendors in the area? Is it a marked savings or not? Like if our drivers would just have a card to go in, or we have certain vendors. I just kind of wonder if that's ever been done before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Sterner. As far as the bid, it did go out to local and national providers, and there's a steep discount based on our volume of fuel that we purchase versus paying like if you paid by a card at SA. Under this current contract, we get a discount on the wholesale price, which is a lot steeper than what you'd get on the pump price at, say, SA or Holiday on the fleet program. So we're saving a significant amount of money here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes, Chair. I was just wondering, is that, or did all of the bidders, were they providing the same type of wholesale option? I'm wondering what the advantage was in providing the lowest bid for the winning contractor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. I'm not sure I understand your question there. We put out a bid for X amount of gallons and for a price. All the vendors came back and said, I will give you this price for that, say, 10 million gallons.
Okay, so all of those proposals were for wholesale priced gas.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. And just so I understand this right, so this would be limited to MTS and Metro Mobility. I'm wondering if we, with this process, have in the past, like, negotiated for sales across divisions. And I guess what comes to mind, right, is like Metro Transit police vehicles in addition to Metro Mobility vehicles. And just wondered if staff could speak to that.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Fredson, sorry about that. That I'm unaware. I typically don't have those kinds of dealings. And I don't know, I guess the biggest challenges is we go through a huge amount of fuel, so it's a discount. I don't know what type of fuel usage the police have. That would be something different. All of our providers also take a tanker at a time, so it's a minimum 7,500 gallons at a drop, and that's really where our discount comes from. And I don't know where the police are as far as their usage on that, but it's certainly something we could look for in the future, someone in procurement.
All right. That's a good question. We can definitely, I think it's worth, asking about, what we're doing across the division. So we'll just sort of, we'll make sure I follow up with Wes to see, get some more information too. All right, any additional questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-342.
This is Fredson. I would move the staff recommendation.
It's moved by Fredson. Is there a second?
Second by Gonzalez.
Second by Gonzalez. Is there any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings. Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Sterner. Zirin. Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. On to our next business item, which is business item number 2020-295. It's 2021 operating grant agreements with funding transitway counties. We have Ed Petrie here.
Good afternoon, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm presenting business item number 2020-295. It is for the 2021 operating grant agreements with the funding transitway counties. The action this evening would be that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute operating grant agreements for calendar year 21 with the funding transitway counties of Anoka, Hennepin, and Ramsey to receive funds in calendar year 2021. They're for the Metro Blue Line for just over $13.8 million. Metro Green Line LRT with just under $14.4 million, and the North Star Commuter Rail for about approximately $3.8 million. As some background, back on November 18th, 2020, the Council approved business item 2020-292 which authorized the regional administrator to submit these grant applications to the funding counties for the 2021 funding. I have been working over the last month with the counties, answering questions, going back and forth. And this action this evening then would then allow then the Metropolitan Council then to authorize the regional administrator to execute these operating grant agreements. Also, the funding for these county agreements was included as part of the 2021 operating budgets that were adopted by the council last Wednesday on December 9th. And with that, Chair, committee members, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-295.
Chair, I'd make a motion to approve the item. This is Sterner.
Moved by Sterner. Is there a second?
Chambliss seconds.
Seconded by Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Becky, could you call the roll, please?
Chambliss,
Aye.
Cummings, Ferguson,
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin, Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Thanks. We're on to business item 2020-325. It's diesel exhaust fluid procurement contract. And we have Abel Mumbe here. There, I think you're still on mute. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me. The proposed action before you is for the council to authorize, award, and execution of contract 20P226 with LubeTech and Partners LLC in the amount of $507,386 to supply diesel exhaust fluid in accordance with the council specification. Around Metro Transit has 870 powered vehicles. Diesel exhaust fluid is a liquid comprised of water and urea that treats engine exhaust before it leaves the vehicle to reduce NOx emission. Bus maintenance staff refill diesel exhaust fluid just like any other fluid carried on board, like fuel or engine coolant. Diesel exhaust fluid to operate Metro Transit buses is purchased through purchased by the council through a contracted supplier that delivers to Metro Transit garages. The price is based on an estimated delivery of 153,753 gallons annually. An invite for bid was advertised on September 29th. There were 5 suppliers that registered as placeholders for the project. Procurement facilitated a public bid opening on the 28th. When 4 bids were received, the Office of Equal Opportunity did not set a DBE or MCOB goal for this project, as it is for diesel exhaust fluid only. It is not federally funded, therefore DBE program is not applicable. It is a locally funded contract, therefore MCOB program applies, and it is guided by statutory authority. This is a procurement of a good. Statutory allows for setting goals on a contract for construction, consultant, professional, or technical services. It does not apply to goods. In situation where no goal is set, the Office of Equal Opportunity searches the MCOB directory for providers that could provide for such a product. The search did not produce any MCOB form that would produce diesel exhaust fluid. LubeTech and Partners LLC was the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. The rationale is 4 bids were received. LubeTech and Partners LLC submitted the low bid of an estimated 3-year term of $507,386. The remaining 3 bids were competitive, ranging from $530,449 to to 601,483. The award and execution of this contract for goods and delivery services in excess of 500,000 requires the council's approval. A DF contract advances Thrive through the lens of promoting regional livability, sustainability, prosperity for everyone by continuing to serve residents who depend on transit as well as residents of the region in an environmentally friendly manner. The cost for this was budgeted was included in a Metro Transit budget, and at this point there is no known opposition to this proposal. Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'll take any question that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council members? Councilmember Chambliss.
Thanks for the presentation, Abel. I've got a couple questions. One is regarding the exhaust fluid, and the other one is regarding underutilized businesses.
Sure.
For the diesel exhaust fluid, how much of an effect does this fluid have in reducing emissions?
So what diesel exhaust fluid does is, as the engine runs, it basically burns the exhaust after it runs. So in effect, it reduces. I don't have the exact amount of how much it reduces, but basically burns the exhaust so that it controls pollution.
Okay, so obviously, whoever monitors the emissions has said that this type of fluid was effective. I was just kind of curious about how effective it was. Secondly, I recently looked at the underutilized business list and was wondering how many of these businesses are still intact after the pandemic, and also how often we update that list. Since this is kind of this just came up by me now, if it's possible for our EEO department to come back and, or maybe I'll ask them separately if they can come back and tell me about that list, because I'm curious. I know it's not under transportation, really, it's really at a higher level. My question is.
I see Councilmember Ferguson is with us as Chair's Management Committee. That's probably where that would kind of land. So Chris, do you want to comment?
Sure. So all of the lists are in essence self-reporting. So if there's a business that has gone out of business, there's not really a great process for whether it's our list or the CERT list or the state list or the federal list for those to get removed, other than on an annual basis. We reach out to all of the businesses to ask them to reaffirm their status as a DBE, and that process is going on right now. And so if people don't respond, then they would reach out further to them and continue to look for them to respond and make sure that they're still in business. So there's not all the DBEs they report and they update their business status and they update the products that they offer and all of the other services that they have available for those lists. So we don't, I would just, we can reach out to people, but we don't always get responses back from all the businesses, even if they are in business. People tend not to, not everybody responds. So you don't want to pull somebody off the list just because they didn't respond to a particular email.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember, for that. Any other questions from committee members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-325.
To Sterner, I would motion to approve the item.
All right, moved by Sterner. Is there a second?
Seconded by Ferguson.
Second by Ferguson. Is there any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Becky, could you call the roll?
Chambliss. Cummings. Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Zirin, Barber.
Aye. With that, the motion carries. Thank you very much, Abel. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you. That concludes our business for the evening. I think that all 4 items can move on consent to the full council, unless I hear any other opposition to that. Okay, we'll send everything on consent. So next we've got Commuter Express Service and Park and Ride update, and we have Adam Harrington and Anna Flintoff.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My name is Adam Harrington. I'm the Director of Service Development.
You're a little tough to hear, Adam.
Well, I am going to be short. I'm going to turn this over to Anna. We're here to give information about the Express Network and changes in how we're managing our network today and how we're managing our facilities this winter. So I'll turn it over to Facilities Planning.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. My name is Anna Flintoff, and I'm the Manager of Planning and Urban Design in Metro Transit's Engineering and Facilities Division. And if I could have the next slide, please. So I'd like to start with talking a little bit of the role of the park and rides in the regional transit system. Park and rides are transit stops that have parking available for transit riders and carpoolers. They can be served by express bus, light rail, commuter rail, or BRT service, but they are primarily oriented to commuters that are going to downtown and the University of Minnesota. And what they do is they help us to funnel people who live in lower density communities to one transit stop, creating the customer density that we need to operate efficient express transit service. And it's been an important tool for the region to manage peak period congestion on highways and efficiently move workers in and out of downtown during the peak commute times. Park and rides vary widely throughout the region. We have park and rides that are 1,000 parking spaces like Highway 610 and Noble. We have park and rides that are 100 parking spaces like St. Luke's Lutheran Church. We have park and rides that are structured parking ramps, and we have surface parking lots. We have facilities that are transit only use, and then we have facilities that are shared use like at churches. Some facilities are owned and operated by transit providers, and others are owned and operated by private entities like churches or cities or counties. And some park and rides are also co-located with transit centers where transfers with suburban local routes can also occur. Next slide, please. The most successful park and rides have a combination of frequent transit service, fast travel times to downtown relative to driving, and ample parking capacity. Location is also important. The best geographic location for a park and ride is one that is downstream of a residential population of users and upstream from natural barriers or points of major congestion on a roadway. Successful facilities are located with proximity and access to regional highways for both transit vehicles and park and ride customers. So a good example of this is the Foley Boulevard Park and Ride in Coon Rapids, which has really good access for both commuters that are coming in cars as well as buses with a exclusive ramp onto the freeway. Next slide, please. So a few facts to help understand the regional park and ride system. There are over 33,000 parking spaces in about 100 facilities. Metro Transit operates out of about 70 facilities and the suburban transit providers at about 30 facilities. And we do an annual park and ride survey each year, and we find that about 55 to 60% of the region's park and ride capacity is typically utilized. And parking capacity has been very stable over the past decade, growing 4% from 2008 to 2019. Park and rides are heavily used by commuter express riders, but within the transit system as a whole, the vast majority of transit riders walk to and from transit stops. Within Metro Transit's bus system, 7% of bus boardings occur at locations that have a park and ride, and 11% of regional bus and rail riders that were surveyed in Metropolitan Council's 2016 onboard survey reported that they drove and parked at one end of their trip. 7% parked at a park and ride facility, and 4% parked at locations that didn't have park and rides. And I'm going to turn it back to Adam now.
Thanks, Anna. Next slide, please. So this will be a familiar slide. Let me know at this point. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So here's a little bit of a recap on where we've been with 2020 and Metro Transit response to COVID-19. And of course, a big part of that is how we manage our social distancing. And as the governor executive orders indicated, those who can work remotely should. And so most of those commuters who are using our park and ride service are in an office environment in the downtown or at the University of Minnesota. And so that's had a big impact on how we plan our service, because this committee has heard before, we've focused our remaining service on the highest ridership routes in those communities most reliant on transit in the balance of how we've delivered our service. And the next couple slides will give a little bit better picture of what that looks like in reality. So next slide, please. This picture is, again, one that we've seen before, but today what I will focus on is the bottom red line, which is the commuter express bus ridership. And you can see that for the past 9 months, we've been carrying about 5% of the pre-pandemic ridership loads into the downtowns. And at the same time, we've been carrying about 25 to 30% of bus and rail ridership. So next slide, please. Here's the statistics on how we've scheduled our transit service, and you can see, again, familiar slide hopefully, that the service indicated by the bars on the left half of this chart, which represent local bus service and LRT, we're back to mostly 90 to 100% of what we had scheduled pre-pandemic. But in the Commuter Express and North Star, we are at 33% to 25%. And so there's a significant scaling back according to the demand that's precipitated. And that's also enabled us to focus our limited resources during this pandemic on those communities that rely on our service more heavily. Next slide. What that looks like today, this is a map that shows level of bus service by bus stop for any given route that we operate in blue. And the larger the dot, the more weekday bus trips, rail trips that we operate. You can see that the largest volume of service that we provide is in the core cities on those core routes, and that it thins out significantly once you get further away from those core cities. Also on this map are the suspended routes. They're the tan colored line, and those are largely express routes. There are about 55 routes that are currently suspended during this new situation. The next slide shows the inverse of that map and shows the commuter express bus routes that we are operating and where they go. And the pink lines show the routes that are suspended. So you can see from this map that there's a lot of service focused into the core cities, but it's really focused on the freeways. So that means there are a number of parking rides that are not being served, and a lot of capacity that will be focusing back on those commuter express freeways. So with that, next slide. Back to Anna.
So every fall, we coordinate an annual park and ride usage survey, and this is a regional partnership among the regional transit providers, Anoka County, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation. And I want to thank all of our partners for helping with this survey again this year. The survey includes both park and rides and park and pools. Park and rides are facilities that have transit service, and park and pools are facilities that are operated by MnDOT that are just for carpooling. We conduct this count on the last week of September or the first week of October. We count one day at each facility on either a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday. And this year we had to make some modifications to the survey due to the pandemic's impact on service as well as staffing availability. Normally we count both parked cars and parked bicycles. This year we did not collect bicycle usage. Normally we collect license plate information in even years, and we did not collect license plate information this year. We also reduced the number of facilities that were surveyed because of service changes. We only counted facilities where commuter express service had not been suspended at the time of the survey. Next slide, please. So this map illustrates the locations of park and rides throughout the region. The gray colored park and rides are the locations across all transit providers that were not included in this year's survey. And then you can see Metro Transit bus facilities in the royal blue color. Light blue is Metro Transit rail facilities, MBTA in orange, Southwest Transit in green, Maple Grove is a teal color, Plymouth is a dark blue color, and North Star Link in yellow is actually off the map. So in total, we counted 66 facilities with over 25,000 parking spaces. Next slide, please. So what we found in this year's survey is that there were a total of 800 parked cars at these park and rides. This is a 96% decline over last year's count of 18,653 cars. So this high level of decline is very similar to the trend that Adam showed previously with express bus ridership during the pandemic. You'll also notice that the change is pretty consistent across all transit providers and across both bus and rail. Next slide, please. We've been tracking regional park and ride capacity and utilization through this annual survey since 2004. So looking at the colored bars on this chart, you'll see that the blue bar represents the number of parked cars that were observed in each survey year. The yellow represents the empty parking spaces. And for 2020, the gray represents the parking capacity of facilities that weren't surveyed this year. So there's a couple of important trends to note on this chart. First, the parking capacity in yellow was expanded steadily through about 2015. Parking utilization in blue grew from 2004 through 2008 by about 6,000 park and ride users, or a growth of 49%. But from 2008 through 2019, park and ride usage grew only 4%. And then, of course, you'll see the over 90% decline between 2019 and 2020. So we have largely built the capacity that was forecast to be needed through 2030. And park and ride use before the pandemic was growing pretty slowly. We have ample capacity to support future ridership growth in the region. And our planning has shifted in recent years from a focus on expanding the system to a focus on managing the system that we have. But there is some park and ride expansion planned in the region. All of it is associated with transitway projects. There are about 5,000 additional park and ride spaces that are currently planned through the Green Line extension, the Gold Line, the Blue Line extension, and Rush Line. Next slide, please. And then finally, looking at the busiest facilities in our 2020 survey, the busiest facilities in 2020 were also our busiest facilities in 2019, but we see the same kind of rate of change as we saw in some of the previous slides with the system as a whole, over 90% change. The only facility that has more than 50 parked cars was the Maple Grove Transit Station. And Maple Grove Transit did suspend bus service at all of their facilities except for Maple Grove Transit Station. Next slide, please. So because of these service and ridership changes, we're in the process of making some temporary changes to a few underutilized park and rides to conserve maintenance resources and better secure the facilities. Our maintenance staff started this effort in late November, and it's taken a little longer than we anticipated due to some COVID staff absences. There are 5 bus park and rides where all bus service has been suspended, and these are all Metro Transit owned and maintained facilities. The first is the I-35 and Kenrick parking ramp in Lakeville. This facility was closed on November 18th, and we locked the elevator and stair tower, and the driveways have been blocked with traffic cones and cables. And then we have 4 surface parking lots in St. Louis Park, Lino Lakes, Vadnais Heights, and Blaine. And we're suspending contracted snow removal services at these facilities, and we'll also be blocking off access to these facilities with traffic cones and cables this week. And then there are 2 light rail park and rides with excess parking capacity. The first is Fort Snelling Station. It has 2 parking lots with about 1,000 parking spaces total, and we have less than 100 users there right now. So we have plenty of capacity in one of the lots to accommodate the demand. So we have been planning to consolidate parking over the winter at the north parking lot to reduce our contracted snow removal services. We are having some ongoing conversations about this facility, though, because we have received some feedback from both customers and staff that this may be confusing for customers, and it is our most heavily used facility in the Metro Transit system. So we will be continuing those conversations this week and communicating with customers what we decide. And then finally, the 28th Avenue Station Park and Ride is the largest park and ride in the regional system with 1,600 parking spaces. And we're seeing less than 50 parked cars right now. The stairwell and the elevator tower of the parking ramp are getting a lot of wear and tear from people congregating and sleeping in the stairwells. And it's been a challenge to keep the facility clean and safe and a healthy environment for everyone that uses it. We don't need transit customers to use the stairwell and the elevator tower to access the upper decks of the parking ramp because there's plenty of parking capacity on surface lots and on the ground level of the parking ramp. So we will be closing the upper levels of the ramp and locking the elevator and stair tower. We're working with a vendor to help implement these changes, and that's going to take about a couple more weeks for us to finish. Also note that all of these closures are temporary and they can be reversed as ridership and service grows. Next slide. And then while we did not conduct a license plate survey this year, we do this typically every 2 years on even numbered years. And we do this so that we can map the license plates, associated addresses, and better understand the market areas for our park and rides. This data is from 2018. Each point represents a park and ride user with a Minnesota license plate. Wisconsin license plates are not shown on the map. The blue line outlines the Transit Capital Levy community's boundary, and the areas symbolized in the darker gray are the 7-county metro area. As you can see, park and ride users come from a wide geographic area. 89% of users in 2018 resided within the boundaries of the 7-county area, and 79% were users that reside within any of the Transit Capital Levy communities. This information is really useful in understanding the market areas for each park and ride, and we plan to conduct another license plate survey post-pandemic when we have more park and ride users, hopefully in the fall of 2021. Next slide. This concludes our presentation. We do prepare annual park and ride survey report every year. It hasn't been finished yet, but it will be posted on Metropolitan Council's website in the coming weeks. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Chair. And I was kind of wondering on is the HAT team going to be coordinating with the 28th Avenue with the vendor when you close that down of trying to find our citizens some housing issues?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Sterner, yes, our HAT team and our police and our facilities maintenance staff are all working together to coordinate that effort.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, just comments. This survey really means a lot with all of the changes in ridership. and tracking this closely, maybe even more closely than normal, will help us plan for future changes to ridership and parking. I know a lot of folks may be going to either flex schedules or working from home. These changes are going to be kind of significant, I think, in terms of the impact on how we service our customers. So thanks for this information, and I look forward to hearing, how things are impacted with ridership with this pandemic, and also just the changes in where and how people work.
Thank you, Council Member. Are there any additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Adam Harrington. Additional comment.
Yep.
Just generally to Councilmember Chambliss' comment, we've been talking with downtown Minneapolis businesses in particular, as well as on occasion small businesses, and trying to learn about what they're thinking as far as bringing their employees back to the work environment. And they have all said that they're planning on not bringing anyone back before May, usually in the June timeframe, and then that flex schedules would probably be part of that. One comment that really stuck with me is that people felt they wanted to have a little bit more control of their environment before they start coming back into the office. So that's part of what's driving what we're seeing today, and puts us on a little bit of a holding pattern for a couple months.
Yeah, when you say, if I may respond, Chair, when you say control of their environment, are you talking about when they come into work control, or on the, as they travel to work?
Madam Chair, Council Member, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of I can control my car and who's in it and when I'm going and when I'm coming and how I get there. And I think what some people are seeing is that in a year where they've lost some of that in some areas of their life, that this is one area that they may want to be exercising it. So as we begin to come back in 2021, we'll be careful to really roll out the red carpet for people, not just on Commuter Express, but on our system at large.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, to maintain the ridership and make sure that everybody's comfortable when they are riding. Has there been some thought about suggesting spacing on the bus, like through labeling or something like that, like they do in other places to kind of space people out?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, it is one thing that we've talked about, and it's primarily an operations decision, but we are not doing that right now, and I do not believe that that's currently being contemplated to designate seats, as it were, or identify every other seat in a vehicle.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any additional questions or comments? I had one. So, at what point, would we look at getting to a point where we feel that we could reopen some of these parking rides, or what's sort of that trigger in that timeline of at least when we evaluate it?
Madam Chair, it really depends on the service, and really around that question that we're talking about with downtown employers and when they start to bring people back. And so when I'm thinking about this, I'm looking at the June timeframe, and that's really along with one of our quarterly picks. So there may be an opportunity there, depending on the state of the pandemic at that point, for us to really start trying to get that message out to our commuters and our everyday customers.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anything else from council members? All right. Well, thank you, Adam and Anna. Appreciate it very much. And with that, concludes our agenda items for tonight. So unless there is any objection, we can be adjourned.